Okay. Hey everyone. I thought it'd be fun to do this. I did one of these a couple weeks ago, and it was pretty well received. So we just put out another article this morning on an idea that I had shared a few months ago that the Wall Street Journal picked up on a couple weeks ago, and um, and then I shared the Moneyball thesis. Basically, we found a company that I actually really disliked at first, and um, spent more time on it. And as I dug in, I liked it more and more. And then eventually, I actually went to hear one of their mid-level execs, who's actually very pivotal to that investment thesis. Um, Went to hear him speak at a conference, and that was sort of the decision point. Hey, okay, it makes sense to actually write this, publish this, talk about this idea. And it's pretty amazing because there's stuff that's sitting there. I think energy is still so underfollowed. There's very very few fund managers that focus on it. There's very few. There's some investment banks, but again, their interests are more in sort of like which companies are going to issue debt or equity or whatever, than in providing, I think, timely, accurate research coverage with, I think, reasonable equity price target assessments, I guess is the polite way to say it. But there's very very few folks actually, I think, like making a concerted, organized effort to find good ideas in the energy space that are differentiated. And so it's sort of crazy that this thing was just absolutely just sitting there. And so I figured I'd do this live thing just for a little bit. Anyone that wanted to come and hear it, and if you have any questions or want me to talk about anything particular, just there's a chat bar down on the right if you're on here live, and I may share this as a recording. I haven't decided yet. So my thought is that you have these things that are really obvious. At least they're obvious to me at the time, and there's sort of this general narrative of, hey, this sector is really undercovered, and people are just not looking for that next idea. They're really sort of anchored on either existing ideas, or they just want to own like an Exxon or a Chevron or some other sort of big company, or a Schlumberger. And then the amazing thing is that when you look at news coverage by reporters and by newspapers that are supposed to be sort of out there looking for stuff that's new and different, and you know things that are newsworthy, they're sort of stuck in a similar rut. Like the reporting on energy, and again, maybe it's just this. I forget what it's called, where attention on your specific expertise when you read the newspaper, you're not excited about it. It's like sort of wrong, but then you turn the page and you believe all the other stuff they say. So it could be a little bit of that phenomenon. But it does seem like when I read stuff about various other industries and sectors and so on, there's really differentiated coverage, and it's really interesting to read the Wall Street Journal, Reuters, XYZ major sort of publication. And I just don't know that that's the case on the energy side. So the Wall Street Journal writes about this company that I've talked about publicly before, that I wrote, I think, a really differentiated view on for Bison Insights in September or so. And they write about it, and this is just such a fascinating company, and it's a super undervalued stock, and it's done really, really well. And it's done well since I wrote about it, and it's done well from sort of its bottom in sort of around Liberation Day, sort of April of last year. And they miss, so it's controlled. I like these companies where possible um, to be controlled by folks with very deep pockets, where it's their own money. They made the money. It's not someone else's money. It's not whatever. It's theirs. They have a good track record. People tend to repeat what they've done before, as sort of a rule. And so I like that a lot. And it's even better when there's folks that are not 100% tied to that particular subsector, energy industry, or whatever. And so this company has some of that outsider perspective, which I think has contributed to its variant outperformance. But it's also very, very cheap and has been delevering, which is really important, I think, in terms of understanding the upside. Um, and then also has this other big thing, and the Wall Street Journal just completely misses all of that. All of that. They just talk about this one thing that's newsworthy, that's sort of like recent, and they just miss the whole thing. They miss like they say in reporting that it's like burying the lead, where you cover one thing, the headline isn't perfect, And but it's somewhere in the article. But in this case, they buried the whole thing. So they caught one aspect of it sort of, and then they missed sort of the main things. So I made sure to write about that. I like tweeted about it and posted about it a little bit at the time they covered it, and then finally got the chance to go through in detail and point out sort of some of the things that they missed. And this stock is up considerably. It's up about 41% from when I wrote about it, versus the energy market's up about 7% from that time, from that data publication. And then I think the crazy thing is it was very, very cheap when I wrote about it, and it's still very, very cheap in the sense that the stock is up, but they paid off some debt and their cash flow is up, and they're still at a tiny fraction of their replacement cost and still trading cheap very relative to various other similar companies. And they're in a subsector that's really hated. So being cheap versus their comps is really something. I think their whole subsector is going to do really, really well. So anyway, it's been pretty fun to have that sort of exposure. And like weirdly, the stock still went up a little on the Wall Street Journal talking about them related to this one thing. But there's this big aspect of it. It's just amazing to see it just sitting there. I own a lot of it. I like it a lot, and it was fun to talk about. So on this Moneyball idea, I think it's going to be sort of similar, where there's going to be some big Wall Street Journal or Forbes or whatever article in 6 months, and I would bet that they actually would cover some of the important stuff on this, that this company has been buying and selling assets and doing a great job with it. Or that there's, again, someone involved or a couple different groups involved that have real money in it and real alignment with it, that have real track records of capital allocation and accomplishing the thing that this business is trying to accomplish, and where it trades at a tiny fraction of its replacement cost, but also a big discount relative to very, very similar businesses. And so I like stuff like that. I think it's sort of easier. I could have a bullish view longer term on oil. I've got my like $250 WTI hat in the background. But I like to own stuff where I can make a lot of money on it, even if oil prices are sort of depressed and stay depressed for a while. And so, I think there's a lot of upside for this one. I think people are just not looking at it the right way. There's some ugly stuff up front. I didn't like it at first. I didn't like it when they formed it. I haven't liked it as I dug in. I realized that I was just sort of biased, and that my view over the number of years as it sort of evolved had stayed stagnant. And again, like I've been working really hard on improving. Everyone has sort of their challenges, and I've been working on this in terms of taking fresh looks at companies and trying to do the Charlie Munger inversion thing, where I love a company, invert it, and like really figure out how I'm going to lose money on it, and just really like put the bear hat on. And then if I hate a company, really looking at it carefully and trying to figure out sort of how it could go up anyway, where there's intrinsic value and so on. And this one really, like, as I dug in, I was already warming up to it, let's say over the last 6 months or so, and the stock performance has been poor recently. So I don't know if like the technical traders will like this idea at all. But the fundamentals have just been improving so much. And from what I can tell, the consensus view on this thing is just dead wrong. And, the moon and the stars are sort of aligned on it. So very exciting. So uh, it's 34 degrees here in Houston right now, which is exciting. Right now, fortunately, we have a lot of natural gas power generation running, but we also have a lot of renewable capacity that's on. And is not running and not contributing to the grid. And it's really unfortunate, because huge amounts of taxpayer money and huge amount of rate money, like the money I pay for utilities and other folks here in Texas, is going towards these nonsensical projects that are generating no power right now when it's most needed, and or almost no power when it's most needed. And it's just an astonishing grift and horrible. And I don't know if it's directly investment related. I think it is, in the sense that as people become more aware of it, as they have more and more blackouts and other issues and whatever, because of these failing energy policies, I think there's going to be sort of a continuing shift back towards reasonable policies. But it's just astonishing. I mean, I figure a third or so of my utility bill is just covering for malinvestments and subsidies for solar projects that are generating zero power right now, and wind projects that are generating way too little relative to what was invested in them. And sure, at certain points, do they generate some power? Yeah, but it's not even really needed that much when they do generate them, and they're way overbuilt. And those subsidies all go pretty much towards those like least economic, least necessary projects. If they were necessary and they were economic, they wouldn't need the subsidies. And so anyway, there's a real, I think, room for improvement in energy policy. And, we live through these moments where it's just so clear and either so great or so terrible. And then it's actually ironic. So this winter storm is not just here in Texas; it's sort of all across from Texas all the way up um, into the Northeast. And so right now, last I checked, the northeastern grid. Here, I'm just going to pull this up again, so I'm not using the wrong numbers. Um, Any ISO. I'm going to pull this up. It was 30% oil, 39% oil right now. So isn't it wonderful that the Just Stop Oil folks weren't successful? Because if they were successful, then there would be blackouts right now in Boston and across New England. And so right now, 39% of the power in New England is being generated by burning oil and oil related products. So isn't it wonderful that a number of the folks that live there funded Just Stop Oil and other sort of similar radical environmental organizations. They've been blocking natural gas pipelines. I mean, there's natural gas that is not far from there with very low environmental impact. Natural gas is very clean. It's very reasonable. And then when I look at it, I mean, I'm literally just at iso-ne.com. When I look at it, they highlight their renewable mix, which is generating a whopping 5% of the power. And in their highlighted renewable mix, which they're really excited about to brag about with their clean energy transition, um, they're, they show in their ostensibly renewables, which they call clean, 36% of that 5% that they're generating is wood, and then 32% is refuse. So they are burning trees and trash to generate this ostensibly clean energy renewable power. So it's complete nonsense. They're very, very lucky that they were unsuccessful in stopping oil. And frankly, it's astonishing that there isn't a natural gas pipeline from the Marcellus, just miles away from the Marcellus through New York, which is opposed to it, into Massachusetts, which is also sort of opposed to it. So again, it's just astonishing. It's one of those things. Interstate commerce is regulated by the federal government. It's not up to states in terms of those sorts of things. Just like you can't block federal highways from one state to another if you're in the middle. You can't block them from trading with each other. They should not be able to block these natural gas pipes. It's astonishing, but even more so, it just highlights how asinine this whole like Just Stop Oil thing is. Look, they should really, if there was like justice in the world, every person that donated more than like $20 to Just Stop Oil should have their power cut off um, until oil is no longer a material portion of this resource mix. I know it sounds harsh, but like, look, if you're going to try to deprive power to everyone, you might as well have your power deprived. And you want to deprive energy to the poorest and least fortunate and so on, you should suffer a little. And there do seem to be no consequences. These things are sort of asymmetric. It's like sort of rich virtue signalers trying to crush the rest of us. And fortunately, they've been a little unsuccessful. In Europe, it's been pretty bad. They have really severe restrictions on power consumption and energy consumption. It's pushed Germany and several other states into very deep recessions. And unfortunately, those countries have responded to that by becoming more socialist. So their socialist, radical environmental and regulatory agendas have led to bad consequences, and they think the solution is the thing that's caused the problem. So, I think there's some real problems there from a regulatory perspective, and I think the trajectory in some of those countries is pretty scary and negative. Unfortunately, we're also on a similar trajectory in places like Boston, and fortunately, they've been unsuccessful, and they're now enjoying their lack of success in stopping oil, as 39% of their power is from burning oil right now. And a bunch of their renewables are from burning trash and wood. Um, let's see what else. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens with natural gas. I have a cautious view on natural gas prices and the natural gas market here in the US for 2026. I'm worried that the slowdown in incremental LNG facility turn ons will. and ramp ups will negatively affect the market relative to the increase in supply. And so it's been interesting seeing the price go down a lot after putting that out and then up a lot. And obviously there's a short-term price spike from this winter weather, and perhaps as the weather stays cold, the inventories will fall enough that the market should be fine. In which case, great, we have some very interesting ideas. I've some ideas I've written about that have a lot of upside. Um, and I think I think it'll be really interesting to see what happens with that market. And maybe we end up with really high natural gas prices, which is great. I'll make more money. And maybe we end up with, after this storm is over, there's some sort of disappointment, or people realize, hey, these LNG exports were stopped in addition to the natural gas incremental demand and reduced supply. So it's also possible that that happens too. So we'll see. Um, but I do think it's interesting sort of tracking supply outages, increased demand, and then also LNG export outages. And the LNG export outages actually seems like an aspect that people don't really appreciate so much. There's a bunch of LNG export facilities that are off for right now. Not really good news for Europe, which frankly, again, sort of their abysmal energy policies mean that they're going to have way more bad news than good news on the energy front until they change their policies. Um, but it is maybe going to help save some of the U.S. natural gas market, or maybe not. We'll see in terms of how these things balance out. I've seen some estimates. It looks like U.S. natural gas supply is down about 10 BCF a day, which somewhat matches with the amount of LNG exports that are off. And so really the story is just how much more natural gas demand are we going to have from incremental heat and power demand versus expectations, and versus sort of the average for a normal winter. And then how does that get offset by incremental supply as the freeze offs and so on come back on. I think that's it. Clayton, thanks for the comment. Um, okay, I think that's it. I think I might just close this up. Thank you all for joining. It's sort of fun to try this platform out. I'd really love, if you're from Substack and you're listening to this, I'd love for this to be just automatically integrated into being able to stream on other platforms. It's sort of odd. Substack tries to do everything sort of all in one spot, and then they're like, oh, hey, here's this like 50-step technical thing to try to stream on multiple platforms at once. Like, realistically, guys, you should be doing this so that people can watch this on a variety of platforms, originated on Substack, not originated through StreamYard or some other sort of nonsense. Anyway, thank you all for joining. Have a great day, and stay warm.